If anybody is struggling with mental health, your thoughts are toxic.
Mental health is emerging as a major issue in today's society. A subject that for generations was considered taboo is now on the forefront of an emerging health crisis. The question is why? Is this a new phenomenon, or is it just becoming worthy of exposure? Is it the result of compounding issues such as stress, economic instability, politics, and technology? Or are there deeper issues that are running at a biological level? Could it be that in the same way that our environment, the foods we eat, and uncontrolled emotions lead to toxicity within our body, that our minds are being affected as well? In order to better understand this growing epidemic, we have to first decide the questions that need to be asked. Can toxic thinking lead to poor mental health? Do the foods we eat and what we drink contribute to toxicity in a way that affects our emotions and attitudes, our very outlook on life, and our identity? Are we seeing an increase in mental health issues because of the increase in toxicity? To get some answers, I collaborated with Matt Christofaro. Matt is a mental health coach with the Thrive program, and he has a unique story. He doesn't just coach from research and education, but from experience. See, Matt has battled his own mental health crisis and has learned how to overcome his challenges and is now helping others do the same. Matt, take me back to where this started. How did you discover you were dealing with mental health issues?
Well, it all started back in middle school. I started having panic attacks, a little bit of OCD, generalized anxiety disorder. Around that time, it was my grandfather was in and out of the hospital, so I was...
Matt's grandfather became ill, and he had to experience his health complications. It's hard for children to see the illness or death of a loved one, and oftentimes we don't know how they will be affected. Matt saw an increase in his anxiety, leading him to almost daily panic attacks. His mom was concerned and began taking him to see specialists. He was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. He was labeled as having disorders. In the course of the year, his conditions got worse, to the point that he could only go to school 1 or 2 days per week.
She was taking me to therapy, things like that. I ended up taking SSRIs, antidepressants, and things got a little bit better.
Over time, he got better, but the issues remained. But he began to own his labels. I'm just the guy with anxiety. I'm just that panicky guy. I just have panic attacks. That's just who I am. He tried alternative therapies like hypnosis, mindfulness, and breathing exercises, but he still didn't understand why he had panic attacks. He wondered if this is what life would be like forever. It was at this time that he discovered the Thrive program, and he made a decision for himself.
I'm going through this program and it's going to work, or going through this program and it's not going to work, and I'm just going to accept I'm just that panicky guy I just have to deal with for the rest of my life, but I'm going to stop trying at that point. One of those two things needed to happen. Fortunately, the better thing happened. And in about 3.5 weeks, I felt like a different person. I felt amazing. And so I went through the program with no desire of becoming a coach. I just wanted to be fixed. And it fixed me. Or I fixed myself. It wasn't what the coach did to me. So I was like, what the heck kind of magic is this? Why did this actually work when nothing else worked? So I made my girlfriend go through the program because she's a middle school teacher and she was having anxiety and low self-esteem. Same thing, changed her completely in a few weeks. And that's when I was like, I need to become a coach. People in the US do not know this thing exists because we're based out of the UK. And people are struggling way more than I am, thinking that there's absolutely nothing that they can do, and they need to know that there is. And so here I am to help people. I had panic attacks and all that stuff for 24 years, was told I had all these disorders. I didn't have disorders. I didn't know how to manage my thinking. That's it. Like most of us, we're not taught how to manage our thinking when we're young, like we are how to cross the street safely, how to tie our shoes. And so now I'm here to help as many people as possible.
This is profound. I think the first step in understanding issues that manifest in our thinking is to look at the root cause of our thinking. In this moment, Matt uncovered a powerful realization. We teach our children so many skills, basic skills like brushing their teeth, tying their shoes, riding a bike. And we also teach them more complex skills like maybe finances, a musical instrument, or sports. But there are skills that are being overlooked, drastically overlooked. In fact, in some cases, they are completely neglected. How to manage our thoughts is one of them. Managing our thoughts is a skill. I think there are adults that are hearing this for the first time and realizing, I was never taught to manage my thinking. It doesn't come naturally. These are skills. They must be learned, practiced, and guarded intensely to see maturity. And just like if we neglect obvious skills such as riding a bike or tying our shoes, there are obvious consequences and limitations in our lives. In the same way, if we neglect to learn to manage our thinking, there will be consequences and limitations. For Matt, the consequences became debilitating panic attacks and social anxiety.
Well, it usually starts with, well, I guess it has to. It starts with one thought. One thought that you get very scared by. And it's in that moment where if we did know how to manage our thinking, it wouldn't lead to a panic attack. But we have that one thought. So let's take the example when I was in a job interview. I think, I have to do amazing right now. This is it. I have to do amazing. I have to answer these questions perfectly. I have to ask intelligent questions. I need to be the smartest guy that interviews. Oh my God, what if I don't? What if I don't? Oh, what if I stumble? What if oh my God, I'm freaking out. Now my heart's beating fast. And oh my God, am I having a heart attack? And you can see where I'm going. And all that's happening way faster than I just described it. That's happening in like seconds. And before you know it, especially for the first panic attack, you think you're dying. You think you're dying. You're going to die in this interview. So you're definitely not going to get the job. And even if you're not dying, how embarrassing is that going to be? The guy interviewing you is going to have to drive you to the hospital. So you're having all these thoughts in like seconds, and you get very scared. And then what happens is, because you got so scared, you turn that experience into a full-blown like phobia. You're telling your brain that was a threat. Do anything you can to help me not ever experience that again. So then you become hypervigilant. Next time you're applying for the next job, oh my God, I hope it's not like last time. I can't have it be like last time. And it's going to be like last time because you don't want it. That's what happens, and it's horrible.
So it's just really like this spiraling or snowballing effect.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
How often was this kind of snowballing effect happening to you? Was this like maybe once a month? Was it every day? Like, what did that look like when you were going through it?
When I was younger and all this started, it was every day. I guess because I was so younger and I don't know the right phrase. I want to say less intelligent. Maybe that is the best way to put it.
Right.
And it's even scary because you don't know what the heck is going on. So I was in the nurse every day. I was calling my mom every day, just disturbing her at work. Mom, can you pick me up? Can you help me? And I think she did. I think she did pick me up most of the time until the therapist is like, you can't do that because that's just, it's giving more attention to what this is. You kind of have to give them tough love. So at that point, it was like every day. Then as I got older and I was an adult and right before the Thrive program, it was happening maybe once a week. But again, it's happening during the most important parts of my life. Very important meetings, interviews, things like that. So even if it was happening once a month, but it was during the one thing you didn't want it to happen during, that was plenty to be like, something needs to change.
Yeah. So it kind of, and so in other words, it sort of becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you set yourself up for failure and you just keep failing.
That's exactly what it is. It's so simple.
Yeah. So, obviously there are a myriad of mental disorders, anxiety being one of them, panic attacks, and I know they diagnosed you with lots of different things. I guess my first question to this would be how, like, whenever we think about toxicity, like we are surrounded by environments that are toxic all the time. And I've talked a lot on this podcast about, the physiological effects of toxicity and what it does. But really what we're talking about here is like mental toxicity, right? And so how do you help somebody identify that they are being saturated, if you will, in an environment of mental toxicity? Because a lot of times, like with physical toxicity, it's easy to kind of go in and like, okay, let's take inventory. What are the products I'm using in my house? What are the cleaners? Oh, there's these chemicals. Oh, I'm using these candles. That's a problem. And we can physically remove all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a lot different when it comes to mindset and thoughts and emotions. So what are some red flags, or what is like a process of kind of filtering that? I don't know if I'm asking my question well, but what are your thoughts?
You are. It's actually very easy to answer. It's something that we don't do. Mm-hmm. If we just, throughout the day, put some Post-it notes around, set a timer to go off every 10 minutes that just reminded you to check on your thinking, and just kind of look at, am I being nice to myself? Am I beating myself up? Am I thinking catastrophically, like, oh, if I don't get this job, that's it, the world is going to end? Yeah. Those are all toxic ways of thinking. If anybody is struggling with mental health, your thoughts are toxic. It's the only thing that can create poor mental health. It's not a chemical imbalance. A lot of people are probably going to be shocked by that, but if you read the research, chemical imbalances are a result of our poor thinking, and our poor thinking is what causes the anxieties and the depression, things like that. So as a result of all those horrible thoughts that are causing the problems, that's when the brain chemicals start to fluctuate, and like serotonin goes down, things like that.
Wait a minute. We need to rewind. Matt just said mental issues are not a result of chemical imbalances. Mental issues and toxic thinking are what actually cause the chemical imbalances in our bodies.
Okay, I try to sometimes not say it as powerfully as I want to, because the therapists and doctors out there will flip out, and that's perfectly fine. I don't care.
So you're saying, the common belief, if you will, is that, mental disorder, all these kinds of things that we're dealing with, it's just genetics, and you're just kind of prone to that or born that way. What do you say?
So what ends up happening is, and it's apologies to all the moms listening, what ends up happening is we usually just copy the way that our mothers think. The same exact way that we copy our accents from our parents, our habits, our attitude. It doesn't always have to be the mother, but it usually is.
Sure.
So what ends up happening is when you're developing, and you copy all the unhelpful ways that they think, all the unhelpful ways that they behave. So a real world example is my mom.
Now, obviously, there are some severe issues that are very complicated when it comes to mental health, thinking patterns, and mental disorders. It is not our goal to tie everything up in a box and say, it's your fault, or this is the one root cause. Humans are more complicated than that, and to portray this simply without the nuances would be irresponsible. However, in many cases, Matt is bringing the understanding that the issue is the lack of skill we have in managing our thinking, and in his case, this proved true. So Matt realized that he was adopting his mother's worries and anxieties, but for him, they were being amplified and consuming his life. The world is a scary place. Don't talk to strangers. Be careful who your friends are. Don't take food from anyone. And when you are in school, you represent our name. Don't do anything to shame us. Don't do anything stupid. Don't make your teachers mad. This led to a lot of overwhelm and lack of control in Matt's life. So leaving the house every day became a danger zone. Over time, Matt just began to think, I'm anxious. This is just the way I am. But all he did was copy the environment around him. Once Matt realized this, he realized he had the power to change it. Matt used to consider himself an introvert. I'm just an introvert. It's just the way it is. But he began to realize over time and with intentionality that he did not have to be an introvert. Things changed, and they changed quickly once he learned he had control over how he was thinking and his life. So I wanted to take our discussion a little deeper and look a little bit more at this epidemic at large and really try to unpack what is the cause of this and how do we get help to people who are looking for it.
So I'm going to throw a couple of things at you, and I just want your thoughts. So according to the National Institute of Mental Illness, it said in 2021, which is a few years ago, 22.8% of U.S. adults, okay, so we're looking at almost a fourth of U.S. adults have a mental illness, okay? Particularly young adults, 18 to 25, have the highest prevalence, which is interesting because that's kind of what you experience. According to the WHO, suicide is the fourth leading cause of death in teenagers 15 to 19. Okay. And according to the CDC, more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness. So again, right around that 25% mark. So, my first question is, has it always been this prominent and we're just now starting to talk about it, or we're just now getting this research in, or have we seen an influx? Because obviously with the dynamic of just economics and the world and everything from COVID on down, like it has made a lot of shift in the way people handle life. And, I talk a lot about stress because stress was one of the things that led to my illness, right? And so do you think in your field and in the things that in the people you're working with, do you think that there are some specific triggers that have made this an uptick? Or do you think that it's really always kind of been around and we're just now starting to recognize it or talk about it?
That's a great question. I think that it's definitely been around to an extent that is way too high forever. We just didn't really know about it because we're becoming more open and progressive as a society, as a culture, where we can talk about this stuff more. I mean, we could always talk about it, but It's very more nowadays, hey, you can open up and we can, what's going on, versus, no, big boys don't cry, rub some dirt on it. You know what I mean? It's not really like that anymore for most people.
Right.
So people are talking about this stuff more, but I think we're also living in a time that it's tough. I could talk about so many different things. The first thing I'm thinking of is like the snowflake generation. I'll just say what I'm thinking, and how it's people are kind of babied. Here's a great example. My girlfriend, it's harder for her as a middle school teacher to deal with the parents than the children. What ends up happening is she's a phenomenal teacher. She's won all types of awards over the years. The kids will misbehave, and the parents, their first reaction when you talk to them is, well, why are you talking to my kid like that? What did you do to make my kid misbehave? You don't want to use that like, oh, back in my day, but really back in my day, because I used to goof off in class. My mom would say, what were you doing? Why weren't you paying attention?
Right.
Which I think is how it should be. And so these kids are thinking they can just get away with anything, and that they're being coddled in every way imaginable. And that is not good for building strong mental health, because they're not going to feel independent. They're not going to feel like they sort of are able to control things in life. They feel sort of like immune to things. And when I say immune, I mean, like, oh, I can't get detention, things like that. So It's just the whole being coddled thing is not good.
Okay, so expound on that. Why is that setting up? Because I know we have lots of parents listening. We have lots of teachers listening. Because I was a teacher for a long time, and I totally can see what you're saying, and I've seen this played out many, many times, right? So kind of explain, why is this detrimental for mental health whenever we don't allow kids to experience any kind of ramifications for their actions? We always guard them.
Because they're not going to learn that life is hard and things are not always going to go their way.
Yep.
So they're never going to really grow up having a strong defense against those things that happen in life. So when stuff does hit the fan, and let's say they get into the real world, or let's use that example. They get into the real world and they're in a job interview or whatever. They need to understand that they better do a good job in that job interview, because the parents can't help at that point. And this is just a dramatic, ridiculous example, but it's just for the purposes of trying to illustrate the point. If they're never forced to really think for themselves, really build up high self-esteem based only on what they think of themselves and not external factors, if they don't lower their social anxiety, they're going to grow up feeling out of control. And when you feel out of control, that's when we create phobias, we create depression, things like that. So I guess that's a long way of saying they just need to kind of be slapped in the face with a little bit of reality. I don't know if that's the right way to answer that question.
No, I like it, because what it made me think was this, that when we allow children to experience the consequences of the ramification, it helps them to understand they are in control. Because it's the choice that they made, it's the decision they made, and this is what happens. Yes. If we distance them from that, then they feel like they have no control, because it doesn't matter if I do something good or bad.
Yep.
I can't control the outcome.
Yep.
That's powerful. That's super, big nugget there.
Yes. So thank you for putting that very concisely the way that I should have just done.
I'm just processing, right?
Yeah.
I love that. So, okay. So, obviously this affected you most in your teenage years and in your early 20s. And according to statistics, this is also seems to be the case, right? So one question that I have is, is there any research that you know of, or why is it so prone to happen in adolescence? Is it because of all the hormonal changes we're going through, because we're trying to find our way in life? And really, is the answer kind of what we've talked about? We need the strong parental figures to push us through those times. So what are your thoughts?
It's probably a mix of both.
Yeah.
It's definitely mostly the way that the kids have already grown up, all the bad habits that they have already copied from their parents. Because, and not all of them do. Not all of them. There are plenty of them who grow up thinking, I control life rather than life just happens to me. They grow up with high self-esteem. They grow up with low social anxiety. The reason I keep mentioning those three things is because that's all we teach in the program. And when you make those three things happen, you're thriving in all areas of life. Some kids do grow up copying those traits from those parents who have those traits. As a result, when they get to those years that can be very stressful, going to new schools and being on your own and going to college and I got to do a good job because I need to get a job. Those kids who grew up with those healthy ways of thinking are going to be able to take on anything. They're going to be confident. They're going to do well in school. Even if they don't do well, they're going to bounce back from it and figure it out. So they're not even really going to be affected by that stuff. Unfortunately, most people are not so fortunate to grow up like that. Most of us grow up with the opposite of that, feeling out of control. They think catastrophically. They think in a black and white way. They think that life just happens and I have to do my best to make something happen every once in a while. And they try to be a perfectionist, and that's never a good thing. They grow up with low self-esteem, whatever. So then those kids experience those exact same milestones in life. They're going to school and going to college, trying to get a job. They're not able to bounce back. They are getting freaked out. They're creating anxiety. They're creating phobias. And you're going to notice I'm saying creating, because these things don't just happen to us. And this exact example illustrates that, because how could, let's just use random numbers, how could half of those people grow up perfectly fine and strong and not be fazed by any of that stress, and half of them develop mental issues like I did? It's not the thing. It's not the experience. It's not school. It's nothing's causing the anxiety. It's just how people are reacting to it.
Okay. So for the teacher out there, or more importantly, the parent or the grandparent or whatever, it looks like the key would be an early understanding of this in a child's life, right? So for those caregivers, for those role models, for those people who have direct influence on those kids, what are some telltale warning signs that these kids are starting to spiral in their thinking? Because obviously the kid's not going to recognize that. But I'm sure, there's the severe cases like maybe you, where you're having the panic attack and it's like this physiological experience. But I would guess that most kids that are dealing with some of this thinking aren't at that point yet. Are there triggers, are there warning signs that a parent can pay attention to, not to try to label their kid or freak out, but just to be aware of, like, what would you look for just to say, like, if I'm seeing this behavior, maybe I need to dig a little deeper?
If a kid is wanting to avoid things more and more, and that could be situations, that could be places, it could be things, it could be spiders, it could be really anything. If you notice that they're really avoiding things, that is a telltale sign that they feel out of control, and that they have deemed whatever it may be some kind of a threat that they need to avoid. And what ends up happening is, if they're avoiding one thing and because they feel out of control, they're probably going to find the next thing because they're going to think it's scary. So I'll give you an example. We specialize in one particular phobia, and it's called emetophobia. It's the debilitating fear of vomiting. And so children who are showing signs of that may not want to eat as much. They definitely won't want to go on car rides or a plane, things like that. And it's just a fear of being out of control. So if they're afraid of that, they're probably going to be afraid of any other event where they would be out of control. Probably going on trips where their parent is the one driving, things like that. So avoidance. If they're avoiding things and it doesn't seem right, all the other kids are running around doing whatever it is, but they're crying, something's going on.
Yeah. Okay. Does it work the other extreme? When some kids feel like they don't have control, they're out of control, instead of that retreatism where maybe they avoid things or they become fearful, does it ever happen the opposite, where they begin to act out more and try to control more in a more aggressive or like maybe tantrum type state?
That could happen, yeah. A great example would be developing OCD. The reason that people develop these compulsions is because they feel a sense of control. If I touch the doorknob 5 times before I leave, I feel in control.
This can manifest itself in many different ways. Eating disorders are a perfect example. I can withhold food from myself, or I can eat as much as I want. Matt explained that when people feel like they can't control some things in their life, they tend to over-control other things. At the end of the day, it's just an attempt for control. A major warning sign that this thinking pattern is spiraling is when people attempt to control any and everything in their lives. This cycle is often the very thing that is ruining their lives.
So with a child, is there any kind of protocol or method in which a parent can give them areas of control very systematically to help them avoid, or I guess to help them realize that you do have control in some things, and then in some things you don't, and understand that balance?
Yeah. So if they just reassured the child, and if the child felt out of control, hey, it's okay, you don't always have to be in control. Tolerate being in control. And just speaking to them like that.
Matt explained that it's in these situations that we need to reassure children that we are there with them through the things that they don't know how to tolerate. And as we guide them through that and we help them tolerate it and we tolerate it with them, they begin to grow in understanding that even though they may not be able to control every situation, they can learn how to walk through it.
How do we begin the process to detoxify our thinking, right? Because this is so fascinating to me, because so often I've thought about toxicity and detoxifying as this physical process, and we got to really clean out our cells, and yeah, that's true. But here we're talking about something very different, but I think it's still applicable to understand there's a process. So I think this will get into a little bit of what you do, but share with us, like, what is the process you've gone on? What's that journey looked like? How come it was so effective? And give us maybe just a couple of tips that people can start to do on their own to start to get themselves back in balance and not have that toxic spiral by thinking.
So I would say the first and most practical thing you could do is put sticky notes around the house just to check in on your thinking. Put them everywhere. Go crazy with it. Put them in the bathroom, on the TV, the kitchen, things like that. And every time you look at it, just kind of look at the thought in your head. Ask if it's helpful. If you're struggling with mental health, it's probably not going to be helpful. And challenge it. You might be thinking, oh, I only have an hour to cook. If I don't cook, it's going to be awful. Everybody's going to be mad at me, and then I'm going to get divorced. And that's just crazy. More often than not, it's probably just catastrophic thinking. You're just in the habit of doing it. The reality is probably you have plenty of time to cook. Nobody's going to be mad at you. It's going to be fine. All of this stuff all these toxic ways of thinking, they're just habits. We just got into the wrong habit. That's all this is. The entire program I teach or coach, I don't teach it, but I coach, is just building the new habit. So I had 24 years of thinking in a horrible, horrible way that was very conducive to causing panic attacks. Mm-hmm. I had to really monitor my thinking, challenge my thoughts, and do it for long enough where I built the new habits to change it. And it's literally something as simple as that. So years ago, I would have been sitting here right now thinking, well, first of all, I probably would have taken a Xanax before I did this. I would have had high social anxiety. This is important to me. So I would have been thinking, I gotta have the perfect responses. I can't sound stupid. I need to be the best guest that he ever has. And I was just in the habit of thinking like that because I copied it from my mom. You got to do perfectly. You got to do this. And now it's just, I'm going to do a pretty good job, and pretty good is pretty good.
Yeah.
It just took monitoring my thoughts, changing them, challenging them for a long enough time to build a new habit, like any other habit. That's all it is.
Wow. So it's simple. And it's funny because, detoxifying your life is also simple. Like, switching out cleaning products, changing the food that you eat. It's all simple steps, and they all compound into something big, and you get a great product. So, I think if anything, if we could help people to understand that, like, no one is so far gone that, like, you can't get yourself healthy again. Because when you're not healthy mentally, like you said earlier, it's going to affect every area of your life and your body and your longevity. So just like there are people that are struggling with chronic illness, there are people that are struggling with diseases and different things. They need to start taking steps toward health. Same thing here. You are bringing so much insight and so much empowerment to people because you're telling us you don't have to run to medicine. You don't have to run to drugs and pharmaceuticals and prescriptions. And you don't have to, feel like you're this victim that just like, oh, well, you were just born with this. Like it, just like with me, with my sickness, when I realized that I'm not a victim, that means I can do something about it.
Yes.
And so then you can just be intentional in those steps. So, obviously we're talking about it and somebody might be listening and be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But then it's like, what do I do now? So there are people that are going to need a coach to walk them through this. They're going to need help with this because when you're trapped in some of these things, it's when it's hardest to see the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So how can someone reach out to you? Where do they go for help?
The best way would be through Instagram. My Instagram name is Thrive, with Matt. And the periods are very important because there is a Thrive with Matt. I don't know who he is, but he has nothing to do with what I do. So Thrive with Matt with periods in between through Instagram. I offer free Zoom discovery sessions just to tell people what working with a coach is like.
Okay.
And how whatever they're dealing with is predictable in both the way that they created it, how they're maintaining it, and how to overcome it. This is simple stuff. In everything that you just said, you nailed it. Nobody is too far gone. Most of our clients who overcome that specific phobia I mentioned before have had it decades, including one woman who had it 75 years. She got over it in 8 weeks. I'm not a therapist. I am just a dude who overcame 24 years of panic attacks and OCD and all that stuff, had tried everything, like all of our clients do, and found the one thing that works. And now I'm just helping people change their limiting beliefs. That's a massive part of the program. And just build up strong, powerful ways of thinking. And when you do that and you feel in control in life and have high self-esteem and low social anxiety, you will not have phobias. You won't have, OCD or PTSD. You'll get over that stuff.
Yeah. And that's powerful. So, Matt, we're going to put links to all of your socials and to your website and everything in the show notes. But I think maybe for the person who's sitting there feeling anxious right now, saying that probably wouldn't work for me, this is, this sounds too good to be true, whatever, that's probably the person that needs to reach out to you.
Yes.
Because it's that is the spiral thinking right there.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If for that person who is thinking that right now, I'll show you how predictable this is. You feel out of control in life. You hate losing control. You have low self-esteem, and you have high social anxiety. If you answered no to any of those three, you'd have to look deeper, because if you're suffering with some kind of mental health thing, all three of those things are at play, and you really have to dig deep. You might think, no, I have high self-esteem, but if it's based on the car you drive or the title you have at work, what happens if you get fired tomorrow? Then you're screwed. Your self-esteem has to be based only on what you think about you. This way, nobody can shake it.
Yeah.
And that's why I threw out before, I'm not a therapist, I'm just a regular dude. This is different. And I would encourage people, if they're like, this sounds like magic, go on our website. The whole program is based on hundreds of research papers and 35 years of clinical experience. We have hundreds of testimonials, including Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones and The Last of Us and The Worst Witch. She overcame emetophobia with us. Everybody, I tell clients, your story, you're not special. And what I mean by that, before people are like, oh, this guy's being a jerk, is we are all struggling for the exact same reasons. It's not because of a traumatic event that happened in the past. That's what everybody thinks. That's what I thought. It's about our beliefs now, how we're thinking now, how we're not managing our thinking now. That's what matters. So that's the awesome part, is that we created this. Don't beat yourself up. We created it, but that's empowering, because that means it's not the scary external thing. We created it, therefore we can uncreate it. The past doesn't have an effect on how you can start taking steps today. So if anything, that should be hopefully the most empowering and motivational thing people hear today. That's my intent.
So do you work primarily with adults, or is this for children as well?
I work primarily with adults, but we do work with children. We have specific programs for children, specific programs for teens. It really doesn't matter.
Great. What about, have you found it effective to work with parents that have kids that are struggling? Is that a good fit?
That is a great fit. And if we do work with a kid, really anybody under 16, we have to have the parent go through the program too, because as you've probably gathered by now, the parent is the reason that the kid is kind of struggling. So if we have the kid building up all these good habits during the day, and then at night, the mom is thinking catastrophically, and it's not going to work. We need everybody to be on the same page, everybody to be doing it together.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Matt, thank you so much. I have learned a ton, and I think this is so valuable because, again, 1 out of every 4 people is dealing with this.
Yep.
And so to realize that you're not a victim and this can be overcome, and it doesn't have to be difficult.
Exactly.
That gives us hope. So, man, appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining me. And we'll put your info in the show notes. And yeah, if you have questions for Matt, do reach out to him.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Healing Conspiracy. Be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite platform, as well as follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Healing Conspiracy. Also, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for exclusive content, including the full version of today's interview. Lastly, visit our website, www.healingconspiracy.com, and share the podcast with a friend. I hope you found today's topic valuable, and we would love for you to give us a 5-star review and share your comments as well. Thanks again for listening, and remember, seek for the truth, and it will set you free.